So, namaste, everyone. Very good morning to all of you. This is a wonderful podcast, and it is on a very important topic. I will let that be covered by our host today, Tanmayji. But let me give a quick, brief introduction of INSIGHT UK. INSIGHT UK is a social movement dedicated to raising awareness, advocating, and campaigning for the cause that concern and impact British Hindu and Indian communities in the United Kingdom. It is spread across 80 towns in UK with a 400 plus membership and a lot many active Kāryakartās. So this webinar today is specifically focused on anybody who is working in the society as Samājika Kāryakartās, and it will give them a lot many tools to perform better, to live a better and a more wholesome life. So today's webinar, we have Brahmacārīṇi Shripriya ji from Chinmaya Mission, and our host is a member of our podcast team, Tanmayji. So Tanmayji, I hand it over to you. You may please start and continue the webinar.
Thank you, Manuji. Namaste and welcome to INSIGHT UK podcast. This podcast is specially arranged for our INSIGHT UK members. Given the nature of our work and the numerous stories we encounter, it's essential to take care of our well-being. This podcast is designed with us in mind, providing a very valuable opportunity to connect and reflect. Today we have Brahmacārīṇi Shripriya ji with us. Shripriya ji grew up attending Bala Vihar and CHYK classes in Kenya and in the UK. She participated in the Yuva Veer program held at Chinmaya Vibhooti in 2012 and was subsequently posted to Chennai for a year of service, where she taught in Chinmaya Vidyālayas and delivered personality development workshops to college students as part of the Chinmaya Institute of Management team. She returned to London to begin a master's program at the LSE, but a conversation and realization of deeper conviction within turned her life in a different direction, and she joined the 2-year residential Vedanta course at Sandeepani Sadhanalaya, Powai in 2014. She received Brahmacharya Diksha in September 2016 under the guidance of Puja Guruji Swami Tejomayanandaji and Swami Bodhatmanandaji, committing to a life of service to the vision of Puja Gurudev Swami Chinmayanandaji and the message of the scriptures. Namaste, Shripriya ji.
Namaste, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Shripriya ji, would you like to start our podcast today by sharing a little bit about yourself and your Adhyatmic journey? What are the challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
Sure. So, as mentioned, I am at the moment the resident teacher for Chinmaya Mission in the UK. And that means my role includes facilitating and delivering classes, workshops, retreats for different age groups, really to work towards fulfilling the vision of Chinmaya Mission, which is to make the wisdom of Vedanta available to all people, regardless of background, regardless of their age, race, gender, etc. And the vision behind this is that Chinmaya Mission works to provide every individual with the tools to make themselves positive contributors to society. So that's what my role comprises of at the moment. I'm also involved in all the different activities across Chinmaya Mission. So guiding and facilitating the various classes, activities that take place. And I have been in this role for about 7 years now. So this was following the 2-year course that I completed. I'd been in the UK, been with Chinmaya Mission, fulfilling this role for that long. And I think in terms of the challenges, it's easy to think that each of us has very unique challenges in life, but actually, regardless of whatever role we occupy, our challenges tend to be the same. when you're working with people, you're working with different types of people, you're working with different teams, you're working to meet deadlines, you're working to organize events. That's the same for everyone, right? So those challenges, they're shared across the board. And even internally, when we're working towards any goal or we're trying to kind of, fulfill a purpose, then the internal challenges that we face are, again, very similar, for everyone. So I think I probably share a lot of the challenges that most people go through. I'm also working with people, also trying to sort of, do my best in the context of the organization. But very lucky and very blessed and fortunate to have a great team and great set of people who are, very dedicated to the vision that Chinmaya Mission serves, which really helps in kind of overcoming any challenges that face us as we do our work. So that's I think nothing unique in the challenges that I faced, and also probably not in the journey that I've been on. But I'm very grateful to be where I am.
Thank you for that insight into your life, Shripriya ji, and the challenges that you mentioned, totally relatable. Yeah, and in today's busy lifestyle, what is the best way to manage stress and prevent anxiety and burnout?
Yeah, great question. I think this is something that is on a lot of people's minds. I think if you look from a very broad perspective, the reason that we face anxiety and burnout is because we are operating in a sort of struggle mode. We are struggling against circumstances. We're struggling against the tasks that we have to complete. And when we don't find joy in the work that we're doing, it's very easy to feel that we don't have enough energy and we cannot face the situations that come to us. And so from the broadest perspective, the answer that is offered to us is that really, when we are aligned to our own inner purpose, and when our work reflects that purpose, and when it reflects our personality, then the tendency for stress and burnout is hugely reduced. In other words, if I'm working in a field that I am naturally inclined towards, and also if I'm working for something that I'm passionate about, it's much less likely that I will get stressed and also get burnt out. Now, for a lot of people, we have to work based on sort of practicalities, right? Not everyone is able to kind of follow their passion in life and make their passion their career, make their passion, their day-to-day. And I think if that's the case, so the ideal solution is that I make my passion and what I'm good at my work. If I can't do that, then I find a reason to love what I'm doing. It may not be the work itself, but maybe there is a reason that inspires me to do the work that I'm doing. So maybe I'm inspired by the idea that I can provide for my family through the work that I'm doing, or I can make a difference in society through the work that I'm doing, or I can set an example to the people around me through the work that I do. So I think if we find a reason to be inspired, and if we find a reason to find enjoyment and to love what we do, then it becomes a lot easier to, number one, avoid, but then also manage that anxiety and stress that arises for people as we work in the world. Everyone's busy, right? We have 100 different things pulling us in different directions. different priorities to meet. And we feel stressed or we feel anxious, we feel burnt out when we don't enjoy what we're doing. And also when we forget why we're doing what we're doing. So from a spiritual perspective, what's really important is we connect to our purpose in life, right? What is the purpose that drives us? And if we remain deeply connected to that, and we remain connected to something that inspires us, that will be really helpful for avoiding these kind of common issues that we otherwise face whilst working in the world.
Thank you, Shripriya ji. As you mentioned, to enjoy what we are doing, and the questions that you just mentioned, what is our purpose and why are we doing what are we doing? I mean, if only we could find answers to that, as you mentioned, the struggle becomes a joy. Yeah. Moving on, Shripriya ji, how do you define the relationship between Adhyatmik Jivan and mental health?
So this word Adhyatma is very interesting. The word Adhyatma literally means pertaining to the self, right? Atma means self, and Adhi indicates a sort of locus. So Adhyatmik Jivan essentially means that life which is pertaining to me. And the Adhyatma, for example, we talk about Adhyatma Shastra, right? So we have scriptures or teachings which are related to myself, which the purpose of which is essentially to help me understand myself better. So this is Adhyatma, right? And on the other hand, when we talk about mental health, and again, speaking about this from a spiritual perspective, I'm not a mental health professional, so I'm speaking from the background of the tradition to which I belong, which is Advaita Vedanta, right? And drawing from the wisdom of the scriptures to talk about mental health. Mental health and mental well-being is reflected in a mind that is balanced, right? A mind that is able to keep its equilibrium, a mind that sees things clearly, that sees things as they are, without adding, lots of sort of our own personal kind of filters on our experiences of the world and relationships, etc. So a mind that has clarity and a mind that is balanced, a mind that is available to me. So our experience of mental health, right? Someone who is having a mind that is available to them in the sense that when I want my mind to be applied to a certain task or a situation or experience, I'm not having to kind of drag it away from its preoccupation with past or future or some anxiety in the present. It's there with me. So if you look at the relationship between these two things, right? From a spiritual perspective, we are able to understand ourselves clearly when our mind is available to us, right? If my mind is super preoccupied with, my huge to-do list, or it's preoccupied with everything that happened yesterday or last week or last month or whatever it is, if my mind is full of anxieties for the future, it will be very difficult for me to be grounded in a spiritual understanding of myself, right? So what we're saying is that even in order for us to function effectively in the world, right? In order for us to have a positive experience of life and the world around us and our relationships, we want a mind that is, you know, is sort of checking all of these boxes, right? Which is has clarity, has balance, etc. And so even more so for our spiritual life, we need a mind that also checks all those boxes. And in other words, the better our sort of mental health is, the easier it is for us to connect with ourselves on a spiritual level, and to have this sort of adhyatmic jivan that we're talking about, which is where we are, you know, we are aware of ourselves, we're aware of the world, we're aware of our relationship with the world and our place in it. Really, the mind is a key instrument in helping us to kind of maintain that awareness and understanding. And this is the thing, right? The mind is, especially from a spiritual standpoint, sorry, and from the standpoint of Vedanta, the mind is really an instrument, right? It's a tool. It's something that we use to accomplish whatever work that we need to do. It's a tool that we use to experience and to respond to the world. It's an instrument in our hand. And this is the other thing, that what Vedanta tells us is, if we understand that the mind is a tool, right? It's an instrument, and it's not fundamental or inherent to who we are, then we end up developing a much healthier relationship with our own mind than if we mistake it to be part of our true identity. So you do see a relationship between the two. And, you know, it's true for our kind of material life. It's even more true for our spiritual life, that we want a mind that is balanced and that has clarity, etc.
Yeah, that's a lot to digest, but thank you for throwing that light and you know, on the clarity and the balance and the mental hygiene that is required to you know, have to relate to the adhyatmic jivan, you know, that we need to have. Personally, you know, it's really answered a lot of my questions, while not negating the mind itself, and using it as a tool to help my adhyatmic sadhana. Yeah. And so what would be your best advice for someone who find themselves struggling to connect with their adhyatmic wisdom or the inner self during those tough times?
So I think that the beautiful thing about this whole journey of self-inquiry and self-discovery is that it happens in the context of the world, right? It's happening as we are living in this world and we're experiencing so many different things. And that inquiry doesn't require us to withdraw from the world in the way that we sometimes think it does. We sometimes feel that, you know, there is, especially when there are a lot of challenges going on, or, you know, like you say, we all face tough times. And those are the times where we feel that perhaps we need some distance from the world or our experiences, and we need to sort of step back a little bit and reconnect with ourselves. But actually, the beauty of the Vedantic teaching is, what it tells us is this whole world and all our experiences of life are really just a mirror to show us who we are. And if we see life that way, then actually life, and both the tough times and the good times, they become a means for us to connect in an even more deeper and meaningful way with ourselves. The tough times don't need to be a reason for me to kind of withdraw from the world. They're actually an opportunity for me to examine what I'm being taught about myself by the fact that I'm experiencing a situation as difficult, right? If I'm facing a tough time, what is it about that situation that makes me feel that it's hard? Because yes, it may be something which, a lot of people would find hard, but there is something within me that is making me experience it in that way, right? Objectively speaking, someone else may also look at it and say, yes, this is, objectively a difficult situation or a challenging thing. But the more important question, especially for, a spiritual seeker, someone who is looking to understand themselves, is what is it that is making this difficult for me? And when we start asking those kinds of questions, then that challenge becomes a means for me to connect to myself, rather than for me to feel distanced from myself because I'm finding it difficult. Right? So all it requires is just that sort of shift in perspective, and for us to be willing to ask questions of ourselves. A lot of the time we're very willing and we're very ready to ask questions of the people around us, right? Why did you do this? And, what do you want? And what do you mean? And we're very willing to ask questions of the world around us, right? Why is this like this? And why is that injustice? And that, but the spiritual life is cultivated when we become ready to ask ourselves questions, right? Why am I feeling like this? What is it, that I'm expecting from this situation? Is that a realistic expectation? What can I do to help myself in this situation? Have I faced anything in the past which will help me to deal with this situation better? Right? Do I have the experience to navigate my way through this? And when things are going well, we generally don't see the need to ask these kinds of questions because we're happy to just sort of, let things go the way they're going. But actually, the challenging times become then a really great opportunity for us to reconnect with ourselves in a meaningful way. And so I think the thing really is to sort of to shift the perspective and to be ready to examine our own intentions and motivation and our own understanding and our own expectations. And that will really help us to connect with ourselves even as we go through challenges in life.
Some of the key points that you mentioned, like asking the right questions, though it seems easier to ask questions to others, but when we have to ask questions to ourselves, as you mentioned, asking the right questions isn't always easy. And just that shift in perspective can make a lot of difference. Speaking of which, it brings me to our next question, which is would you like to share some thoughts to incorporate in our daily practice to improve and enhance our mental well-being, please?
This is a great question in that there is a sort of there are so many options. There is so many practices available for us to sort of incorporate into our daily life. And really it depends, what sort of for a lot of people, it depends what works for you. But one really beautiful practice, which is so important because it gives us it empowers us to reshape our inner world in a way that works for us. This practice, which is pointed out and which is described by Swami Chinmaya whom we call in Chinmaya Mission Pujya Gurudev, and that is a practice of introspection. And so really leading on from, what we were just speaking about, this practice of introspection is something which anyone can do. And it's very simple. And all it requires us to think about is at the end of each day, or even at the start of each day, to review everything that has happened, right? So if you're doing it in the morning, to review yesterday, and if you're doing it at night, to review the day that's just taken place. And review in the sense that you're just kind of going through everything that has happened, right? The conversations that you had, the things that you did. And in the course of that review, what happens is we end up identifying things which we're happy with, right? Things which we feel that we did well. But we also end up identifying things which we know we could do better on, right? So you review your day and you think back to a conversation and you think, okay, I responded to someone in a way that I am not proud of, right? I could have been patient, but I ended up sort of snapping at that person. And so the next question is, if I'm not happy with that response, what can I do about it, right? So the first step is to recognize that something happened which I'm not happy about, and I don't want to repeat that action. I don't want to repeat that reaction, right? And in the moment that we become aware of it, and in the moment that we say that I don't want a repeat of this, we are already kind of deciding to take a different course of action. The next step is, okay, if that situation happens again tomorrow, and I don't want to respond the way that I responded today, then what should I do differently, right? So then what I'm doing is I'm deciding on an alternative course of action. Instead of immediately reacting, I will say, for example, just take a breath, and I will respond differently, right? So you're deciding. Now, say that exact same thing happens tomorrow. And I've decided the previous day, I'm not going to react, right? As much as this person frustrates me, I'm not going to react. It is possible that in the heat of the moment, I will react again. But also what will happen is soon after that reaction, I will remember this is not what I wanted. And so if it happens again the next day, the likelihood of me reacting is again reduced because the memory of that is now fresh.
Right.
And so the idea is that we are kind of very consciously, actively molding our thought patterns through this practice to build the kind of personality and to build the kind of mind that we want for ourselves in our own life. And all it requires is really just sort of 10 minutes of your day to think about what happened and what am I happy with? What am I not happy with? What can I do differently? And when this is practiced consistently, right, we also see consistent change. And we see that we are able to kind of remold our patterns of thinking to make our mind, again, to make our mind a fit instrument with which we can deal with the day-to-day situations that face us. So this kind of daily practice is, in one sense, it's very easy, but in one sense, it is also challenging because it's very confronting to have to review our own thoughts and our own actions, right? Yes. It's not easy to take a mirror to ourselves and our own sort of thought patterns. Because yes, we may find things which we are happy with, but equally we may find things we probably will find things that we're unhappy with. And to accept those things and to face them is not necessarily easy for everyone, right? But at the same time, if we want growth and we want progress and we want change, the first step of that is awareness, right? If I'm not aware of what's going wrong, I will never know how to make change for the better. And so this is a really simple, beautiful practice that Swami Chinmayanandaji has very clearly described in his writings, that really equips any person with the tools to kind of remold their entire thinking and personality in a way that, you know, works for us. So this is a very powerful practice. And then, of course, you have, you practices like just taking a few minutes in the day to just spend time with yourself, taking a few minutes of the day to spend time in prayer, to spend time in reflection, taking time every day to connect with a spiritual teaching. All those things are, equally just as important and just as powerful for us to help kind of maintain that well-being that we spoke about in terms of having a sort of mental equilibrium, maintaining that kind of clarity of perception and response with our mind, with regard to the world and the situations that we face.
As you mentioned, Shripriya ji, being aware and reminding ourselves to be aware, and the tools that you just mentioned, just to practice it daily for 10 minutes to remind ourselves to be aware. The practice of introspection, as you mentioned by Pujya Swami Chinmayanandaji, we can all practice it. Probably we can incorporate that in our daily life, and which will help us mold our thought patterns, and which will probably help enhance our mental well-being and also our adhyatmic sadhana and our swadhyayas in our daily lives.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Most of our audience who are listening to us today are people who work on ground and become witness to some heart-wrenching moments. How can they disconnect from the after effects using knowledge from our Vedanta?
So there's a few things to think about here. And that is, firstly, when we are acting in the world, the way that we are advised and guided is the ideal way of action by our scriptures, by our teachers, is to act according to our dharma, right? So that's the first thing, is that when we are acting in the world, we are acting to fulfill our duty.
Mm-hmm.
And that means essentially to fulfill the responsibilities that go along with the roles that we occupy in life.
Okay.
Right? So that's the easiest way of understanding duty. So as, for example, a parent, there are certain responsibilities which go along with that role which have to be fulfilled. Equally, as a child, I have a responsibility to my parents. As a student or as a householder, as an employee or as an employer, we all have various responsibilities, right? So the first thing for us to check is, when I'm acting, whether on a day-to-day basis or even, if I'm reflecting on a longer time period in my life, am I acting on the basis of, or am I acting according to those roles and trying to fulfill those responsibilities? Or am I just acting according to what I feel like doing? Okay. So the first recommendation is to try as much as possible to give as much time to our duty as we can.
Okay.
Building on that, then we have to ask, what is the attitude with which I am fulfilling my duty? Right? Am I doing it very begrudgingly? that, oh, you know what, I don't have a choice, so I might as well try and do it, and I'll try. If it doesn't work, but at least I tried. Or am I doing it with a sense of cheerfulness and gratitude? Am I doing it with a sense of dedication? Right? How does that come about? Firstly, when we recognize everything that we have gained, right? When we recognize how much we've been given, whether that's by our parents or extended family, whether we have gained from our community, we've gained from, friends, we've gained from society at large, we've gained from the country, right? When we start to recognize how much we've received, then the idea is that a sense of gratitude takes root in the mind. And with gratitude, there is this sense that, okay, if I've received so much, then, I should be able to give something back, right? What is it that I can offer in return for everything that I've received? And when we look at it from a spiritual standpoint, we've been given this body, we've been given the ability to think, we've been given the ability to act, we've been given the ability to experience the world. It's not something that we've blessed ourselves with, right? It's a gift that we've been given. And so what can I do with that gift? How can I, with that sense of gratitude for these gifts that I've been given, how can I best fulfill my duty? And how can I fulfill my duty, not just for the sake of duty, but for the sake of a higher ideal, right? Can I see my duty as fulfilling some larger purpose in life or contributing to a higher ideal? And when we work in this way, then in the course of performing that duty, we may go through difficult times. And it is possible that we will go through experiences which are, like you said, to use the words that, were mentioned, that are sort of heart-wrenching.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm grounded in, one, this is my duty, and I'm grounded in a sense of gratitude, and I'm grounded in that sense of dedicating my actions to a higher ideal, then it will be easier for me to deal with that situation in the moment.
Right.
Because I'm seeing it in the context of something much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And when I see that, I have been given the opportunity to fulfill these responsibilities and to contribute to the world around me, then I also will see that when I go through these experiences, there is a strength that comes to me, which was also coming to me as I was working to fulfill these responsibilities. There is a strength that comes that allows me to face those difficult moments, because I have been living in dedication to something higher. This is one, right? And the thing is that when we work in that way, it is also easier for us in general to then be able to develop these beautiful virtues that are pointed out in our scriptures of compassion and forgiveness and love and large-heartedness, which again are virtues that will help us to face those difficult situations in a way that we are able to get through them more easily, but we are also empowered to help people around us to face those difficulties. Right? So this is when we are grounded in our duty, and we're also grounded in those values. From the standpoint of the philosophy, right? From the standpoint of how does Advaita Vedanta teach us to look at the world?
Mm-hmm.
At the sort of most basic level, what it's telling us is that everything in this world is subject to change. Everything. So good situations will come and go, and difficult situations will come and go. And there is an infinite variety of things and beings in this universe. And that means that there will be situations we go through which we could never have imagined, because that's just the nature of this world, that there is so much that is possible. When we go through an experience armed with this knowledge that this experience is temporary, it may be difficult in the moment that we experience it, but the intensity is lessened because we know that whatever it is I'm going through now, it is going to come to an end. Right? So this is one. The second is that as we align ourselves with the Vedantic thought, what we also, and even, when we are sort of performing our duty in dedication to a higher ideal, what we're doing is we are, instead of remaining grounded in our own individuality, we start to align ourselves more and more with the totality.
Mm-hmm.
And there, what happens then is that there may be a situation that could be viewed as a tragedy from an individual standpoint. But when I look at it from the standpoint of the totality, the perspective changes. Right? So that is another sort of way of dealing with that situation that Vedanta gives us. And then finally, from the highest standpoint, what Vedanta tells us is that this world is only relative, and the truth is that which is unchanging. And therefore, whatever situation it is that we go through, that situation and the body and mind with which we experience it are relative, but the truth remains unchanged. So there is a huge, if we're really genuinely looking for solutions, there are so many thoughts in these teachings which can help us, whether that is, being grounded in our duty, or looking at what values that we can cultivate to help us deal with these situations, to helping us to just kind of cultivate right thinking about the world and the nature of the world and its constant change. There is so much in Vedantic thought that can help us to deal with these difficult situations. And we don't have to necessarily try and practice all of them. We can just pick one, and that will work equally as well as any of the others. But there are solutions.
Yes, there's so many solutions that Vedanta offers us. It's so vast, and it equips us with so much. And as you mentioned, the cheerful attitude, to have towards those heart-wrenching moments, and recognizing gratitude. I feel when we recognize gratitude, there arises a compassion in us, just overwhelming compassion, and which also reminds us of our higher goals, dedicating ourselves to the higher goal, and to be grounded in gratitude, as you mentioned. And I think when you're grounded in attitude, as you mentioned, you get a glimpse, or at least you can recognize the totality. I mean, in everyone, in the whole universe. I mean, you can feel that totality with the universe. So, but a key point that you mentioned, Shripriya ji, is that truth is unchanging. So that is something I will personally keep in mind, that no matter what is changing, truth is unchanging. Yeah. And As this month of May is marked as Mental Health Awareness Month, what is your message to our Samaj, and how important is the role of each one's mental fitness and agility for the collective well-being of our community?
There is a beautiful message that, again, is something that was conveyed by Swami Chinmayanandaji very often. And that is the idea that if we want the world to change, that transformation starts with the individual. And so if we want to make a positive difference to the world around us, really the starting point has to be us. Because when we change, the world around us changes. And so in answer to this question, with regards to the health of the sort of the collective well-being of the community, our individual well-being is really important. And the easiest way to lift ourselves and to lift our mind is by giving. It is by asking, what can I do for the people around me? And especially when we're part of a community, it's so important for us to acknowledge the struggles and difficulties that others are going through, and to be open to supporting them. It's so important for us to recognize and, to not to deny those difficulties and struggles which people may be going through. And to recognize that, what might not be a big deal to me, it could be a big deal to someone else. And being open to that, and being open to supporting others in their times of struggle, whether it's just through offering a listening ear or some kind words, offering them, the space to express themselves. It's really important that as members of a community, we are there to support each other. And so, yes, we have to look after ourselves, but a really beautiful way of looking after ourselves is actually to look after others. Because when we are each looking after each other, we also get looked after, right? Because if I'm asking, what can I do for everyone? Someone else is also asking, what can I do for others? And I will be included in that. And so this is just a really lovely way of thinking about, how we can do good for ourselves and also do good for others, is just asking, what can I give? Right? How can I support someone? How can I be open and understanding? And how can I be supportive and compassionate to everyone around me?
That reminds me of this quote from Ramana Maharshi ji when he was asked, how do you love others? And he said, there are no others. So as you mentioned previously, the totality, when there are no others, it's easier to love and share. And also listening, as you mentioned, just listening can be so healing at times. Yeah, and so we have some questions from the audience, so we can take some questions from the audience now. We have one question. If you faced any specific challenge at the decision to, when you decided to, become a Brahmacāriṇī, did you face any family pressure, or your personally, how was it? So that's one of the questions.
I'm very fortunate to have an incredibly supportive family, incredibly supportive community. So I'm really very blessed in that I didn't really face any sort of objections from anyone in pursuing that path. And really, I would, yeah, it's difficult to think of obstacles. I mean, of course, there are challenges in the work, etc. But I'm really grateful in that I have seen really that my path has been made smooth in places where there could have been difficulties.
And our next question is from Jagdish Ji. He asks, with self-improvement initiatives, like you mentioned, I absolutely know that consistency of efforts and constancy of purpose is critically important. But being consistent with efforts has not been easy.
Basically, how do we maintain that consistency of our efforts?
Right.
And because
Right.
that's the most important thing, right? I mean, doing something in a mission mode for a couple of days or few days, that doesn't bring result.
Right.
But at least for me, it's not easy. Maybe for others, it's been. So.
I think this is a very universal challenge. One is that you're kind of, when we have this question of how to be consistent or how to be disciplined, the answer is really just that we have to be consistent. But having said that, of course, there are ways for us to encourage ourselves, right? So one is, what you could do is you could create some external checks for yourself. So you can, ask someone to check in with you. And that becomes a way for you to make sure, because if you have someone asking you, you don't want to say, no, I haven't done it. And so that becomes a way for you to kind of encourage yourself. That's not always going to be 100% effective or reliable. The other way is for us to create some disciplines for ourselves, right? And so to create consequences. So if I've committed to something and I've not adhered to that commitment, what consequence can I create for myself by which I encourage myself to stick to my commitment, right? And so this will be different for everyone. So for example, sometimes, what's said is that, say you commit to doing a certain amount of japa every day. If you don't do your japa one day, then you have to do double the amount next day. And if you don't do it the next day, then you have to do double that amount the next day. And so you're creating a consequence for yourself, which if you don't want to face, then you have to just do what you said you would do. The most effective way, right, for us to really be consistent is when we have a deep conviction and an understanding of the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. So when I really understand the importance of that practice, and I understand what a huge impact it's going to make on my life, and when I'm deeply connected to the purpose for which I am doing that practice, then that consistency and that discipline will be easier. Because even at those moments when my mind is telling me, no, I'm tired and there is something else to do, or I want a few extra minutes in bed, that conviction will nudge me and it will prompt me to say, no, this is more important. So really it's being grounded in that understanding that will help us.
Shripriya, we have another question from Manuji. She's asking, for a Samājika Kāryakartā who works on challenging social issues, a lot of work may seem like a drop in the ocean, leading to questions like, am I really making a difference? Because at a time, very little, if anything at all, seems to be changing. How does a Samājika Kāryakartā reconcile with this and stay motivated?
I think one thing is to recognize that the results of our actions don't generally make themselves known immediately, right? It takes time sometimes for change to be perceived. And that's not to say that it's not happening, but it's happening at increments which may only be, recognized later. Like how the flow of a river over hundreds or thousands of years makes those stones on the riverbed smooth, you really only see that change after a long time. But that doesn't mean that the flow of water in a day is not making any difference, right? It's every single day, and actually every single moment that that water is flowing is making a difference. And when we work for the community, just like something as simple as planting trees is such a beautiful thing, because you're performing an action which you are never going to see the result of in your lifetime, right? When you plant a tree, you're really just planting it for future generations. And so when we work for the community, it's really like that, right? That we're saying that even if I don't see the result of this, I am still committed to making whatever difference I can. And also to recognize that, from a spiritual standpoint, all change that takes place and all good that is done is really happening with the blessing of the divine and of the totality. And really to see the opportunity to work for the Samaj as a blessing will help us to refocus our attention away from the results of our work and back to the action that we're performing, because we see the opportunity to perform the action itself as a blessing, as an opportunity. And that when we find joy in the action, then even that action will be sort of even more potent, even if we don't see the result until much later.
I think, as you mentioned, when you're walking on the path of dharma, there's no reward at the end of it. Just the opportunity that is given to us to walk on that path itself is a blessing. Thank you so much for reminding us that. And we have some more comments. I think Jagdishji has another question. Samajik responsibilities means not only being positive and spreading positivity, but also restricting negativity, ill intents, and conflict management. How to enhance the conflict management capabilities, particularly managing people with no major stake?
So again, from a spiritual standpoint, the thing that is most effective in unifying people is when there is a shared vision, when there is a shared ideal and a shared purpose and a shared goal. And really that's kind of what we're looking for, right? Is we're looking for everybody to be invested in sort of the same thing, so that even when they're carrying out their different priorities, everyone has the same sort of ideal in mind. And the way to do that, I think, often is to help people understand how they themselves will benefit. Because even if I can't see, even if I can't bring my mind to a bigger ideal, and I'm not necessarily concerned with a shared purpose or a shared vision, if someone brings to my attention how I will benefit from, a certain experience or situation or action, I'm much more likely to be invested in that. And so I think, part of it is helping people understand how they themselves will benefit, because then that becomes an internal motivation that will push them without you having to kind of constantly remind them that, this is a good thing to do. This is, why you should do this, etc. And of course, the ideal is that, yes, everyone has a shared vision, shared ideal, but that has to start somewhere.
Dhanyavad Shripriya ji for sharing your precious, timeless wisdom with us. The tips and resources you have given are very valuable and practical, which can be easily incorporated in our daily lives to enhance our general well-being and blossom to our full potential. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Tanmayji, and thank you so much, Shripriyaji. This could become a very good practice, listening to these kind of thoughts, and that too at the very start of the day. This has been wonderful. You've given some nuggets. I was furiously taking notes. And I think for all our Kāryakartās, those who couldn't join today, because we have a huge group of members, a pool of members all across the country, but they will be watching this later on YouTube channel, and I think it'll benefit everyone. From the very beginning, the way you said that we've got to find our purpose, and if we are working towards our purpose, no work is burdensome, it's joyful. And then thanks to some very good questions by Jagdish ji, you've answered probably what we are always thinking about. Am I doing enough? How should I do this? And you've given that that thought that yes, we are doing our dharma in whichever place we are occupying in our lives. We are doing our dharma. And of course, then the most beautiful line that you said was, looking after one another is the best way to look after ourselves. And I think that is what is very motivational for all Samājika Kāryakartās. So Shripriyaji, thank you so much on behalf of INSIGHT UK, from all our members and from all our teams. Thank you so much. We hope to do this again with you and probably do this on a regular basis with you. It's been very, very helpful. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.